The rain wasn't a cleansing downpour. It was a miserable, rhythmic tapping against the windshield of my battered 2012 Honda, sounding like 1,000 tiny fingers demanding entry. I sat in the driveway of my childhood home, the engine idling with a low, rhythmic rattle that mirrored the shaking in my own hands. The house, a sprawling suburban colonial with peeling white shutters and a lawn that I had mowed every Saturday for a decade, looked different in the rearview mirror. It looked like a tomb. I could still smell the lingering scent of my mother's heavy floral perfume on my jacket, a cloying, artificial lily scent that always made the back of my throat itch. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over the ignition. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in a cage of ribs. Just 10 minutes ago, the front door had slammed shut with such force that a framed picture of my graduation had fallen off the hallway wall, the glass shattering into a million jagged diamonds. My mother's voice still echoed in my ears, a shrill, serrated edge that had sliced through 24 years of filial loyalty. If you walk out that door, Leo, don't you dare think about crawling back when the world chews you up. You are nothing with this family. I shifted the car into reverse, the gravel crunching beneath the tires like breaking bone. As I backed out, my phone vibrated in the center console. A notification light blinked, a steady, rhythmic blue. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it then. I couldn't. I just needed to be away from the suffocating air of that house, away from the demands, the constant reminders of how much I owed them for the basic privilege of existing, and the endless list of chores that had kept me tethered to their whims while my own life gathered dust. I drove for an hour, aimlessly navigating the slick, dark arteries of the suburbs, until I found myself in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of the county line. The neon sign buzzed, a low, electric hum that felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, old grease, and the metallic tang of industrial cleaning fluid. I took a booth in the far corner, the red vinyl cracked and taped over with duct tape that bit into my thighs. Finally, I took out my phone. My hands were steady now, numbed by a cold, hollow sense of finality. I pressed the icon for my voicemail. "You have one new message," the robotic voice informed me.
Then, my mother's voice filled the speaker. It wasn't the screaming banshee I had left behind. It was cold. It was calculated. It was the voice she used when she was deleting someone from her life. "Leo, I hope you're listening. Don't return. I mean it. I've already moved your things into the garage, and the locks are being changed tomorrow morning. Don't bother calling your sisters or your brother to mediate. They agree with me. You've been a drain on this household for too long, and we are finally breathing again now that you're gone. Consider yourself disowned. Don't come back for your mail. Don't come back for your birthday." The click at the end of the recording was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I stared at the phone, the screen's glow casting a ghoulish blue light over my face. I felt a strange, terrifying lightness, as if the gravity holding me to the earth had suddenly weakened. I was untethered. For years, I had been the one who fixed the leaking pipes, the one who navigated my mother's mood swings, the one who managed the bills she forgot to pay, and the one who tutored my younger brother Marcus, while my sister Sarah spent her weekends partying on my dime. I was the glue, the grease, and the engine of that house, yet they spoke as if I were a parasite. I set the phone face down on the Formica table. I didn't cry. I ordered a black coffee and watched the rain streak the windows, turning the world outside into a smear of gray and charcoal. Around midnight, I checked into a motel 2 miles down the road. It was a dismal place called the Oasis, which was an insult to deserts everywhere. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and a pungent chemical lemon scent meant to mask something worse. The carpet was a shade of brown that suggested it had seen too much history, and the television was an ancient tube model that crackled with static. I lay on top of the thin, scratchy polyester bedspread, staring at the ceiling fan as it wobbled precariously on its mount. Thump, shh. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb and placed it on the nightstand. I needed sleep. I needed to disappear into the blackness of a dreamless night before I had to face the reality of being a ghost. I didn't wake up until 6 a.m. The sun was a pale, sickly yellow peeking through the gaps in the heavy blackout curtains. My mouth felt like it was lined with wool, and my joints ached from the saggy mattress.
I reached for my phone to check the time, and the screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that made my heart leap into my throat. Missed call, Mom, 2. Missed call, Sarah, 5. Missed call, Marcus, 3. Missed call, Mom, 8. Missed call, Sarah, 4. Missed call, Marcus, 6. 28 missed calls. My thumb trembled as I scrolled through the log. They started around 2 a.m., a frantic, escalating rhythm of attempts. Then, the text messages started pouring in, a digital tidal wave of desperation. 2:15 a.m., Marcus. Leo, where are you? The basement is flooding. I don't know where the main shut-off valve is. Mom is screaming. 2:45 a.m., Sarah. Leo, answer your damn phone. The power went out in half the house, and Mom's nebulizer stopped working. She's having a panic attack. We can't find the backup battery you bought. 3:30 a.m. Mom. Leo, I'm sorry about what I said. Please. The garage door won't open, and your brother backed the SUV into it trying to get out to find you. Everything is a mess. 4:10 a.m. Sarah. Leo, please. Marcus tried to fix the fuse box and something sparked. Now the kitchen smells like smoke and we're scared. Why aren't you answering? 5 a.m. Mom. Leo, I'm begging you. Come back. We didn't mean it. We can't do this without you. Please, honey. Just come home and tell us what to do. I'm scared. Marcus is crying. Sarah is losing it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning under my weight. I played the voicemail from the night before again. Don't return. I mean it. The irony was a bitter pill that stuck in my throat. They hadn't even lasted 6 hours. For years, they had treated my labor as a natural resource, like air or water, something that was just there, something they were entitled to. They had convinced themselves that I was the burden, when in reality, I was the only thing standing between them and total chaos. They had spent so long belittling me to keep me in my place that they had forgotten I was the one holding the walls up. My phone began to vibrate in my hand. I watched it shake. I could almost hear the frantic, high-pitched cadence of her voice through the plastic casing. I could picture the house, the water rising in the basement, the smell of ozone from the fried circuit breaker, the mangled garage door, and the 3 of them standing in the middle of a mess they didn't know how to clean. I thought about the don't return voicemail. I thought about the locks being changed.
I didn't answer. I slid the phone back onto the nightstand, stood up, and walked into the cramped, yellowing bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, looking at myself in the cracked mirror. For the first time in my life, the person looking back didn't look like a servant. He looked like a man who was finally, truly, alone. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a fresh start. I walked back to the bed, picked up the phone, and typed a single message into the family group chat. My heart was pounding, but my fingers were steady. You told me not to return. You told me you were finally breathing. I hit send. Then I turned the phone off completely. I packed my single duffel bag, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and walked out of the room. The morning air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and possibility. As I climbed into my car, I didn't look toward home. I looked toward the highway, stretching out like an unwritten story into the horizon. They wanted me gone. Now they had to learn what gone actually meant. The key turned in the ignition with a mechanical protest, a grinding shriek of metal on metal that usually would have made my stomach knot with the anxiety of an impending repair bill. But as the engine finally caught, turning over into a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the worn fabric of the driver's seat and into my very bones, I felt nothing but a strange, clinical detachment. I gripped the steering wheel, the cracked leather cool and unresponsive beneath my palms. I could feel the grit of the morning air on my skin, a fine layer of humidity and dust that seemed to coat everything in this town. I shifted the car into gear, the transmission clunking heavily into place, and I didn't look back at the small, dingy apartment complex I was leaving behind. I didn't look at the trash cans overflowing at the curb or the neighbor's cat watching me from a porch railing. I looked only at the windshield, at the way the early morning light refracted through a spiderweb crack in the corner of the glass, turning the rising sun into a jagged golden star. As I pulled onto the main road, the silence inside the car was absolute. I had deliberately tucked my phone into the deepest corner of the glove compartment, buried under a stack of old napkins and a tattered road map I hadn't used in years. It was dead, a black mirror of plastic and glass that could no longer reach out and touch me.
I could still feel the phantom vibration of it in my pocket, the muscle memory of a decade spent on call for people who only valued my presence when something was broken. I could almost hear my mother's voice, sharp and frantic, echoing in the quiet. "The water is coming in, Elias. Do something. Why aren't you answering?" I could see my sister, Sarah, standing on the stairs with her arms crossed, her face twisted in that familiar expression of disgusted disappointment, because I hadn't dropped everything to fix her car or bail her out of another self-inflicted crisis. The highway stretched out before me, a gray ribbon of asphalt, cutting through the damp green heart of the countryside. The smell of the car, a mixture of stale coffee, old upholstery, and the faint, sweet scent of a pine tree air lost its potency, felt like a cocoon. I rolled down the window, letting the rushing wind roar into the cabin. It was loud, chaotic, and cold, but it drowned out the voices in my head. It smelled of wet earth, of manure from distant farms, and of the freedom that comes with having absolutely no destination. After 2 hours of driving, the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a hollow, gnawing hunger and a stiffness in my shoulders. I saw a sign for a roadside diner, the Rusty Anchor, and pulled off at the next exit. The tires crunched over gravel as I parked in a lot that was mostly empty, save for a couple of mud-cattered semi-trucks. I sat in the car for a moment, my hands still hovering over the wheel. My fingers were steady, just as they had been when I sent that final text. There was no trembling, no second-guessing. I stepped out of the car, the gravel shifting loudly under my boots, and walked toward the diner. The air inside was thick with the smell of sizzling bacon, burnt coffee, and floor wax. A bell chimed above the door, a bright, tinny sound that made a few truckers look up from their plates. I slid into a booth in the far corner, the red vinyl cracked and patched with silver duct tape. A waitress with a high graying ponytail and a name tag that read Marge approached me, a coffee pot already in hand. "For work?" she asked, her voice a gravelly alto that sounded like it had been cured in decades of cigarette smoke. She didn't wait for an answer before flipping over a white ceramic mug and filling it to the brim. The steam rose in a thick column, smelling bitter and earthy. "Something like that," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, low, steady, and stripped of the frantic, apologetic tone I usually used when speaking to anyone. "You look like you've been through a war," she remarked,
setting a sticky, laminated menu down in front of me. Or a wedding. No crying, I said, wrapping my hands around the hot mug. The warmth seeped into my palms, soothing the lingering chill from the morning air. And no regret. Just... She chuckled, a dry sound that ended in a brief cough. I hear that. What can I get you? I'll take it, I told her. As she walked away, I stared out the window at the gas station across the street. A man was struggling with a malfunctioning pump, cursing and slamming his hand against the metal casing. A few months ago, a week ago, even yesterday, I would have felt a visceral urge to help. I would have imagined myself stepping out, fixing the problem, and earning a brief nod of thanks that would sustain me for another day of being used. I would have thought of my father, who always told me that a man's worth was measured by how much he could carry for others. But as I watched the man struggle, I felt nothing but a cold, crystalline clarity. He wasn't my responsibility. My mother's flooded basement wasn't my responsibility. My brother's gambling debts, my sister's broken ego, the endless cycle of grateful silence followed by ungrateful screaming, none of it belonged to me anymore. I had carried their weight until my spine was ready to snap, and they had responded by trying to pile on more. The food arrived, a mountain of scrambled eggs, greasy hash browns, and thick-cut bacon that glistened under the fluorescent lights. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. I focused on the texture of the eggs, the crunch of the toast, the way the salt hit the back of my throat. I was hyper-aware of my own body, of the way my lungs expanded and contracted, of the blood pumping through my veins. For 30 years, I had lived as an extension of them, a tool to be utilized and put back on the shelf. Now, I was just a man eating breakfast in a diner where nobody knew my name. I thought about the house back home. By now, the water would be several inches deep in the basement. The sump pump, which I had warned them needed replacing 6 months ago, would be a dead weight in the corner. The ozone smell I had imagined earlier would be real now, the scent of the electrical system giving up the ghost.
I could see them. My mother wringing her hands, my brother shouting into his phone, all of them waiting for the door to open, waiting for me to walk in with a toolbox and a smile, ready to take the blame for the rain itself. They would be calling me. They would be leaving voicemails that started with please and ended with vitriol. They would be calling my friends, my old coworkers, anyone they could think of to drag me back into the pen. I took a sip of the coffee, the heat scalding my tongue. Enjoy the fresh air, I had told them. It was the kindest thing I had ever said to them, really. I was finally giving them exactly what they claimed to want. A life without my meddling, without my judgmental presence, without the burden of having to pretend they loved me. When I finished, I laid a $20 bill on the table, far more than the meal cost. I didn't want change. I didn't want to wait. I stood up, the vinyl of the booth sticking slightly to my jeans, and walked back out into the light. The sun was higher now, burning off the morning mist. The air was turning hot, the kind of heavy Midwestern heat that makes the horizon shimmer. I walked to my car, but before I got in, I opened the glove box. I pulled out my phone. It was heavy, a dead slab of technology. I walked over to the large rusted dumpster at the edge of the parking lot. Without a moment's hesitation, I tossed the phone inside. It hit a pile of discarded cardboard with a dull thud. I climbed back into the driver's seat and looked at the map I had pulled out earlier. I didn't need a GPS. I didn't need a voice telling me to turn left or right. I traced a line with my finger, far away from the coast, far away from the suburbs, toward the mountains in the west. I started the engine again. This time it didn't protest. It hummed, a low, steady brawl of potential. I pulled back onto the highway, merging into the flow of traffic. I wasn't running away. Running away implies fear, a desire to hide. I wasn't hiding. I was simply moving. I was a ghost to them now, a memory of a servant they had broken.
let them drown in the mess they made. I had a road to follow, and for the first time I wasn't driving anyone but myself. The highway stretched out, a blank page of heat and light, and I pressed the accelerator down, feeling the car surge forward into the unknown. The miles bled into hours, and the flat, shimmering horizon eventually began to buckle and rise.
The heavy humidity of the plains gave way to a crisp, thinning air that tasted of pine and ancient stone. I watched the sun dip low, casting long purple shadows across the crags of the Rockies, and for the first time in years, the silence inside the car didn't feel like a void I had to fill. It felt like a sanctuary. I reached a high mountain pass just as the stars began to pierce the darkening canopy of the sky. I pulled over onto a gravel shoulder, the tires crunching softly before I cut the engine. The ticking of the cooling metal was the only sound in the vast, open night. I stepped out and leaned against the hood, looking back toward the east. Somewhere across those thousands of miles, people were still checking their screens, answering demands, and living in the cages they had built for themselves. I took a deep breath, the cold air stinging my lungs in a way that made me feel vibrantly, undeniably alive. I wasn't the person they knew anymore. That version of me had died in a dumpster behind a diner in the middle of nowhere. I turned my back on the distant lights of the valley and looked up at the peaks, jagged and indifferent. I didn't have a plan, and for the first time, I didn't need one. I was finally home, not in a place, but in the quiet ownership of my own soul. I climbed back into the car, put it in gear, and drove into the starlight.